none of them were going to go that deep. It was supposed to be a routine inspection, a routine descent to the old concrete structures at the bottom of the bay, where military installations once stood, then abandoned, flooded, forgotten. The autumn storm passed a week ago. The water is muddy, heavy, smelling of iron and rot. There were 4 of them working together, a team of visionary rescuers, as they called themselves. Formally, they were affiliated with the Civilian Underwater Research Center, but unofficially they searched for artifacts, from sunken equipment to archival containers, sometimes even remains. Anything that could be of any historical or material value. The team was led by Oleg Kornilev, a former Ministry of Defense diver who served back in the 90s. Gray streaked through his short hair, and fatigue and patient distrust of any stories about anomalies showed on his face. Next to him is Misha Gladkov, a nervous young camera operator with thin fingers and an eternal habit of checking equipment 10 times. The third is Artem Serebryakov, a mechanic, sturdy, taciturn, accustomed to listening more than talking. And the last one is Lena Kravtsova, a researcher from a local university, with whom they have been collaborating for the last 6 months. She studied the history of Soviet military installations and was particularly interested in closed zones. The object they were going to explore was listed in the documents as Sector 12/Wave. An old bunker built in the late 70s, then partially flooded due to a groundwater breakthrough. According to the official version, it is a communications testing laboratory. But, as often happens, there was more to the official words. Lena found a mention of him in the archive of the regional museum. Yellowed sheets, top secret, seals, signatures of illegible surnames. One report stood out in particular: audio hallucinations were recorded among the staff after switching on the low-frequency transmitter. Further work has been suspended. Preserve the object. Not a word about the losses, not a word about the reasons. Now, almost 40 years later, the concrete structure was resting under a layer of silt and water a few kilometers from the shore. Judging by the old maps, the depth in the area of the entrance hatch is about 40 meters. The water temperature is 4 degrees. Poor visibility, high pressure. The usual conditions for those who are used to darkness. They went out on the water early in the morning. The cold wind was driving small ripples across the surface, the boat was rocking, the instruments were emitting short signals. The radio channel was hissing in his headphones. Oleg checked the tightness of the suit, habitually felt the carbines and valves. Misha had already started the helmet camera and was checking the recording. Everything looked the same as always, until Lena took out a plastic card from her briefcase, on which a circle was drawn with a red felt-tip pen. "Right here," she said, pointing to a section of the map near the northern coastline. The coordinates coincide with the place where the last communication session was held in 1984. Oleg just nodded. He didn't like discussing the past. It was already felt here, in the damp air, in the quiet hum that seemed to come from the water itself. When they came down, time stretched out. The first 10 meters are a cloudy suspension, then darkness. The beam of the flashlight picked out rusty fragments, pipes, and slabs of concrete from the darkness. At a depth of 20 meters, the shadow from the old deck looked like a giant rib of a dead beast. The water became denser, the sound muffled. "I see the structure," Misha transmitted through the headset. His voice was trembling, but not from fear, from excitement. "Metal. Cylindrical shape. It looks like a mine." Oleg slowly swam closer. The light of his flashlight slid across a gray wall covered with algae and rusty streaks. The inscription, barely visible through the plaque, 12/Wave. The letters are burnt by welding, uneven, as if they were made in a hurry. They secured the cable and began the inspection. The entrance hatch is partially open, as if someone had squeezed it out from the inside. Inside there was darkness, in which the water seemed thicker than the air. Artyom turned on an additional spotlight, and for a second everyone saw, there was a narrow corridor inside, the walls were concrete, and there were traces of rust and gas bubbles on them. Stable, Oleg said. Let's go inside. The sound of their breathing in the balloons filled the space. Every step was muffled, as if the floor beneath them was not concrete, but alive. They were moving slowly. In one of the rooms, which looked like a technical room, there were pieces of equipment, old cables, metal boxes, remnants of devices with Soviet markings. Lena filmed everything on an underwater camera. Her eyes were shining, a mixture of fear and delight. Look, she whispered, even though the microphone wasn't transmitting a whisper. A sign. On the wall was a plaque made of aluminum, covered with plaque, compartment C3. Transmitter number 2. Only for personnel of the 4th admission. This confirms, she said in a louder voice, that radio tests were conducted here. Probably low-frequency ones. Oleg silently looked around the room. He felt that something was wrong here. It's too quiet. Even the water seemed frozen. There were no familiar sounds, crackling, hissing, small bubbles. There was only a dull background, like a distant rumble, and a slight vibration in his chest. They went deeper. In the 3rd corridor, Misha stopped. Commander, there's something here. The lantern picked out a sheen from the mud. A small but distinct metal corner peeking out from under the wreckage of the pipe. Oleg swam closer, carefully shook off the mud with his glove. The water rose in a cloudy cloud. After a few seconds, an outline appeared, a rectangular body with a round lens, overgrown with corrosion. The camera, Artyom said. It looks like an old quart or electronic sin. We took the container, Oleg commanded. Carefully. They placed the find in an airtight bag, marked the location on the map and began to climb. According to the rules, it was forbidden to spend more than 40 minutes in such conditions, but almost an hour passed on the surface. By the time they got on the boat, the sun was already setting. Lena was shivering, but not from the cold. She stared at the metal body of the camera as if it were a living thing. Can you imagine if there is a film inside? She said. Then we'll see what happened. Oleg didn't say anything. There was something else going on in his head. What if we see something we shouldn't? By evening, they reached the base. The hangar smelled of diesel fuel and wet concrete. The camera was carefully removed from the bag. The case was indeed badly damaged, but the cassette compartment was preserved. Inside is an old videotape, the format used in the early 80s. The metal parts were slightly oxidized, but the magnetic film looked almost intact. Lena brought a portable lab scanner. They cleaned the case with alcohol and soft wipes. When the lid was finally opened, the air in the room seemed to have changed. It was as if someone had inhaled nearby. The film is intact, Lena said, examining the tape. Even the mark remains. C/12 V EXP 3.84 inch. An experiment, March 84, Misha said. 30 years underwater, and now. Oleg motioned for silence. There was silence in the room. Only the hum of ventilation and the distant sound of surf behind the concrete walls. They decided to give the tape to specialists from the university laboratory. There was equipment for the digital recovery of magnetic tapes. The next day Lena took the find. The recording was deciphered only a week later. The file recovered by the engineers took almost 40 minutes. The first frames are ordinary. A corridor, stairs down, a man in the uniform of a Soviet engineer, with a helmet and a bag over his shoulder. A sign is visible on his chest, Sector 12/Wave. Operator B-23. The camera moves smoothly, the flashlight illuminates the concrete walls. Voices can be heard off-screen. Male, tired, illegible. Phrases like, channel check, level 3, signal stable, proceed cautiously. Everything looks like a standard test documentary. But at the 9th minute, the sound starts to change. A low background appears, like a bass note, dull, rhythmic. At first it seems that this is noise from the old age of the recording. But the background gradually increases, turns into a pulse, and then into a roar. The camera is shaking, the light is flickering. Off-screen, someone says, the response is too strong, turn it off, and suddenly everything stops for a second. Then the image is returned. There is a cloudy reflection of light on the glass of the door. Something is moving behind him. Vague shadows, stretched out like arms. The camera zooms in, the lens catches the contours. Inside is a room covered in haze. There are dark handprints on the walls. They move as if someone is running their fingers over the glass from inside. The operator takes a step back. Breathing can be heard on the film, accelerated, hoarse. Someone says, "This can't be." And the recording stops abruptly. Oleg, Misha, and Lena watched a video on the laboratory screen. Artyom stood aside, clasping his hands. "Stop," Oleg said. "Back up for a few seconds." Misha rewound it. At the moment when the camera moves away from the door, a reflection flashes on the glass, the face of a man in a helmet. But it's distorted. The jaw is elongated, the eyes are empty. "It's not an operator," Lena said softly. "There is no marking on the helmet." "And now look here," Misha turned on the frame-by-frame viewing. On the 15th frame, something like a shadow appears behind the cameraman, and disappears on the 16th. But if you compare the contours, you can distinguish the outlines of the figure. "What is it?" Artyom asked. "I do not know," Misha replied. "But it doesn't move in sync with the human. As if at a different speed." That evening, they argued for a long time about what to do with the recording. Lena wanted to publish the find and show it at the university as historical material. Oleg was against it. He had seen things like this, not literally, but he knew that there were things that were better left alone. "Let it remain in the archive," he said. "Sometimes the past has to stay underwater." But 3 days later, everything changed. Misha called Oleg late at night. The voice was trembling. "Commander, I checked the recording again, and noticed a strange thing. The frames are repeated. It's like they're stuck. But each time the prints on the glass get closer." "What do you mean, closer?" "I increased it. On the 20th cycle, the prints are almost at the camera." Oleg was silent. "And one more thing," Misha continued. "When I analyze the sound, words appear at a low frequency. I'm not sure, but these are the coordinates. The same ones where we found the camera." The connection was cut off. In the morning, Misha did not come to work. The phone wasn't answering. He was found in the apartment only 2 days later. Empty, the monitor on the table was turned on, frozen in the same frame, glass, fingerprints, and an indistinct shadow that looked like a human face. Oleg stared at the screen for a long time. Then he turned off the light and left. But the feeling that someone was standing behind him did not leave him until the morning. He began to feel the same thing Misha was talking about, a low hum, like from an underground transformer, barely discernible, but constant. Sometimes at night it seemed to him that the walls were vibrating to the beat of this sound. A week later, a report came from the archive of the Ministry of Defense. Lena gained access to the old recordings. In one of the folders there are documents about the closure of the Sector 12/wave. Reason: abnormal radiation. Massive auditory hallucination among the staff. The object is subject to conservation. But there is not a single surname in the list of operators that matches the B-23 marking. Who was holding that camera? Lena came to Oleg with the printouts. "Here," she said, showing the lines of the report. "All the names, but he's not here. It's like he never existed. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe not." They turned on the video again. At the very beginning, where the operator goes down the stairs, a metal box against the wall is visible for a second. There is an inscription on it, barely discernible, synchronization remote control. Stage 3. Attention, do not turn on without approval. Do you think they activated something? Oleg asked. It looks like it. And maybe it's still working. With these words, the hum in the room seemed to increase. The light on the ceiling flickered. All eyes turned upward. Silence. Just breathing. Oleg got up, went to the light switch, clicked, the light blinked, but did not come on. Maybe the network is overloaded, Artyom said. But Lena was looking at the screen. There, in the stopped frame, the prints on the glass seemed to become clearer now, as if someone had painted them. Look, she whispered. There are more of them. After that night at the base, it became difficult to breathe. The air was heavy and humid, as if filled with rust. The lights were flashing for no reason, and every time the lights went off, one of them flinched. No one talked about it directly, but everyone felt the same thing, the presence. Not physical, not visible, but somewhere nearby, beyond perception, as if an invisible glass had appeared between them and the world, and someone was standing behind it. Lena stopped coming to the university. She barely slept. I sat in the hangar with the monitor on, watching the recording over and over again, frame by frame, sometimes until morning. She seemed to need to understand something that the others couldn't see. Oleg tried to stop her, but in vain. He began to doubt himself. Maybe there really was more to this film than just a coincidence. Artyom was silent. He was a practical man and did not believe in mysticism, but even he noticed that at night in the hangar the water in the tanks was gently swaying, as if from invisible sound waves. Sometimes the instruments began to vibrate by themselves, subtly, barely audibly. And it couldn't be a draft. Oleg slept in a small room above the workshop. He dreamed of stairs, going down, concrete walls, a voice from under the water calling his name. He woke up with a buzzing in his ears, as if a generator was running inside his head. In the silence, the walls seemed to breathe. On the 4th day after Misha's disappearance, they decided to return to the place. Not for the sake of new findings, but for the sake of answers. Lena insisted. The coordinates on the recording matched the location where we found the camera. But this is not just a coincidence. It's like someone wanted us to find her there. Do you hear what you're saying? Oleg rubbed his eyes tiredly. It's just old radiation, noises. Noises don't form coordinates, she replied calmly. And they don't cause the same dreams in 3 people. He wanted to protest, but he couldn't. In the evening, they prepared equipment, 2 sonar transmitters, air supply, additional lighting and an old analog tape recorder to record sounds underwater. Lena insisted on magnetic recording, saying that the figure may not catch what is needed. Artyom just shrugged his shoulders. The next morning, they set sail again. The water was dark blue, almost black. A low cloud hung over the horizon, and the wind drove the waves as if something invisible was in a hurry to bring them back to shore. Oleg turned on the navigator. The dot on the screen was blinking exactly where they had found the camera. 50 meters south, he said. There should be a main entrance. The descent was quieter than the last time. No one talked on the radio unnecessarily. The lanterns pierced the murk, and because of the reflections, it seemed as if the light did not return immediately, but with a delay, like an echo. At a depth of 30 meters, a familiar structure appeared, concrete, metal trusses, remnants of fences. I see an object, Artyom said. We approached slowly, without sudden movements. The hallway they had entered a week ago now looked different. The silt that had settled before seemed to rise again. New streaks appeared on the walls, like traces of liquid coming out from the inside. The water seemed thicker and the light dimmer. The pressure is stable, Artyom said. But the background noise is higher than normal. What's the background? Low frequency, below the audible range, but the device responds. Lena turned on the tape recorder. The ribbon stretched slowly, making a barely audible rustle. They moved deeper and deeper. Somewhere at the level of the second compartment, Oleg noticed a strange thing. The light of his flashlight reflected off the floor in a different way than before. The concrete looked wet, but not from the water. The gloss was too even, almost mirrored. "Don't touch it," he said to Lena when she reached out with her hand. "It's not water." She froze. The surface of the floor reflected their silhouettes, but with a delay. A split second later than they were moving. Optical effect, Artyom managed, but his voice broke. At the 15th minute of the descent, they entered a large room, the former central hall. The ceiling is partially collapsed, the beams are skewed. Among the wreckage are several metal cabinets and panels. Lena flew up to one of them and turned on the light. On the sign, synchronous circuit. The Wave 3 project. "This is it," she whispered. Oleg looked at the instruments, and the tape recorder hissed. The tape began to shake, and the sound increased. A hum came from the speaker, the same one they had heard in the video. Dull, rhythmic, with a low subsonic pulse. "Turn it off," Oleg ordered, but Lena didn't seem to hear. She stared at the panel as if mesmerized. There was a tiny indicator light on it, a faint red light. "This can't be happening," Artyom said. "There is no power supply here." But the light bulb was flickering, reacting to the hum, as if synchronizing with it. Then something clicked. The panel body trembled slightly. And at the same moment Lena exhaled sharply, as if she had been electrocuted. "Get back!" Oleg shouted, but it was too late. The water vibrated around Lena. For a moment, it seemed like she was standing in a bubble, inside which time was moving differently. The light is distorted, the movements are blurred. The camera on her helmet started flashing, transmitting signal failures. "Lena, answer me." Oleg kept repeating, but there was only a hum in his headphones. When everything was quiet, she slowly turned to them. The eyes behind the mask were wide open. There, she said dully. "Who?" "Those who didn't leave." Oleg pulled her by the arm and dragged her to the exit. Artyom was walking behind, covering them. The hum in my headphones was getting louder, as if someone was turning up the volume. Sometimes it seemed that there were words in it, but not human ones, fragments of phrases that add up to something similar to coordinates. When they reached the surface, Lena was unconscious. Her eyes were moving under her eyelids, as if she were still seeing underwater. Oleg did not remember how he got to the shore. My head was buzzing, and my hands were shaking. I dropped the tape recorder while lifting. The tape broke, but the piece remained in the reel. Later, after listening to the fragment, they heard more than just a hum. In the last seconds, before the cliff, there was a voice. A man's voice, hoarse, with a metallic thud. "Don't go any lower. The contour is closed. We're still hearing." After that, the tape recorder smoked and stopped working. Lena came to her senses only the next day. She didn't remember turning on the panel, but she was saying strange things. "They're not dead," she kept repeating. "They're in the sound. Everything that is here, everything that is below us, is alive." Oleg tried to ask, but every word she said sounded like part of someone else's rhythm. It was as if someone was speaking through her. Artyom wanted to call the doctors, but Lena refused. "If they hear where I am," she said, "they'll come after me." She disappeared that night. She just left the hangar, leaving her suit and documents. The door was closed from the inside, and there were no footprints in the sand. Oleg searched for her for 2 days. On the 3rd day, he found her notebook by the boat, soaked with fog. There are drawings on the last pages. Waves, circles, similar to radial patterns. In the center of each is a human face, distorted as if stretched by sound. The caption under one of the drawings reads, The synchronization stage. The entrance is open. He burned the notebook. But the drawings remained in my memory. A week later, Artyom said he was leaving. That's enough, he said. This is not our job. We went where we shouldn't have. Oleg did not hold back. But in the evening I received a message from him. Did you hear that? It started again. In my house. The same hum. Artyom didn't get in touch anymore. Oleg was left alone. He decided to return to the bunker alone to finish everything. Not out of curiosity, but because he understood, if not him, no one. Something was still working there, radiating, transmitting. And if the signal is spreading, then someday others will hear it. He recorded everything on a tape recorder. Day 12 after the first recording. I'm going again. The coordinates are the same. If I don't come back, turn off all the equipment. Do not approach Sector 12. If you hear a low rumble, leave. This time he took a minimal kit, one canister, a flashlight, an old analog camera and a knife. The dive started at night. The sea was quiet, almost mirrored. The water seemed to be waiting for him. At a depth of 30 meters, it became difficult to breathe. The hum returned, barely perceptible but recognizable. It was felt not by the ears, but by the bone, inside the skull. When Oleg reached the corridor, everything looked as before. But now the light of the lantern was not reflected. It was absorbed by the walls, as if the concrete had become black velvet. There are palm marks on the walls, stretched downwards, as if someone was crawling towards the exit. He moved deeper. The corridors seemed endless. The water stood still, there weren't even any bubbles. Sometimes he saw reflections, as if someone was passing in front of him, but the lantern did not catch a single figure. 20 minutes later, he reached the very hall. The panel was still on, the same red light. Only now there were two of them. He flew closer. There are scratches on the panel body. Someone wrote on the metal with their nails, "Do you hear?" Oleg turned on the camera. The focus caught the reflection of his face, tired, haggard. But behind him, a shadow flashed through the glass for a second. The hum increased. He felt for the panel switch and pressed it. A click. Then, a blow, as if from inside the space. The water around him vibrated, and the light of the lantern scattered into dozens of rays. Everything went dark. And suddenly, a voice. Not loud, not scary. Quiet, like inside my head. "You're here now too." He screamed, but there was no sound. Only the pulsating light of the red indicator. When the camera signal has stabilized again, the recording shows a figure standing in the center of the hall. Indistinct, as if made up of glare. She takes a step, a second step, and disappears. The recording stops at this point. The file with this entry was found 3 months later. The boat was found on the shore, empty and covered with salt. Inside was a dictaphone, damaged by moisture. But one phrase has been preserved. The contour is not closed. The experts who studied the tape from the first dive noticed a strange thing. A signal appeared in the sound spectrum, similar to the beating of a human heart, but with a frequency of exactly 12 Hz, a frequency that coincides with the internal rhythms of the brain during sleep. The university's laboratory closed a week later. All the materials were transferred to an unknown commission. And at night, in the village near the shore, people began to complain about the noise. Low, barely discernible, as if someone was knocking from the ground. They say that if you record this sound and slow it down 10 times, you can hear the words. They repeat themselves, quietly, monotonously. The wave. Stage 3. We're still hearing. At first, no one paid attention to the sounds. Local fishermen complained about the rumble underwater, but attributed it to the work of old diesel pipelines. The wind was driving the waves, the sea was roaring in the night, it's hard to distinguish one from the other. But then the noise started repeating itself, as if it had a rhythm. People said that it could be heard not only in the ears, but also in the chest, as if something inside was responding to the beat. Then the fish started disappearing. The nets were raised empty, even the small change was gone. Strange spots appeared on the coast, as if they were oily, but when they were touched, a metallic taste remained on the fingers. 2 weeks later, an expedition from the capital arrived in the village, a group of specialists who were sent through the Ministry of Defense. Officially, it's for checking the underwater infrastructure of old communications. In fact, to find out what happened in Sector 12/Volna and where the divers disappeared to. The group was led by Captain Irina Levitskaya, an acoustic engineer, cold, attentive, with the tired look of a person who listens to silence for too long. She was accompanied by 3 people, Sergeant Denis Koval, Communications Officer Alexei Belov and young laboratory assistant Stas Prudnikov, for whom this was his first serious assignment. Irina studied reports, videos, and old documents. In one of the files, I found Oleg Kornilov's name and his latest audio recording. The phrase, "the contour is not closed," made her wary. What did he mean by contour? Belov asked. I have no idea, she replied. But, judging by the archives, we are talking about a system for synchronizing low-frequency communication channels. Something like an underground transmitter that was supposed to pierce rocks and water. Only in those days the technology was raw. If it is still active, then the signal could cause a resonance. The resonance of what? Anything. Not even the brain. The next morning, the group arrived at the shore. The fog was thick, like smoke. The boat rocked at the dock, the engine thudding. Are we really supposed to go down there? Stas asked, looking at the gray water. An order is an order, Irina replied. We'll just inspect the object, remove the parameters, and that's it. And if what caused the noise is still working? She looked at him, then slowly said. Then let's hope it doesn't hear us first. The descent was uneventful. At a depth of 20 meters, Irina felt a slight vibration in her chest, the same hum that the locals were talking about. He wasn't just a sound. It was a feeling as if the body had become a part of something big, invisible, and alive. They found the entrance to the bunker quickly. The metal plaque, 12/Wave, was barely discernible under the layer of silt. The hatch was ajar. Attention, Irina said into the radio. Let's go in. The corridors seemed endless. Lanterns picked out inscriptions, cables, and dilapidated appliances from the darkness. There are traces of corrosion on the walls, and in some places there are palm prints, as if someone was trying to get out. It looks like burn marks, Koval said, touching the wall. But how could they stay underwater? No one answered. They found a panel in the central hall. The red light was still on. Impossible, Belov whispered. There is no power supply here. Measure the voltage, Irina ordered. He took out a portable multimeter and connected the probes. 10 volts. Stable. From where? There was no response. Only the hum, amplified in the headphones. Irina turned on the hydrophone, a device for recording underwater sounds. A pattern appeared on the screen of the spectroanalyzer, rhythmic and repetitive. It's not just noise, she said. It's a signal. Pulsating, at a frequency of 12 Hz. What kind of frequency is this? Resonance of alpha brain waves. If a person hears it for a long time, they may lose touch with reality. At that moment, the indicator on the panel flashed. Then again. Stas recoiled. She seems to be reacting to us. Don't touch anything, Irina said sharply. But it was too late. The panel made a short click, and the buzz around seemed to turn into a voice. It had no words, but it felt meaningful. Everyone had the same thought inside their head: we are here. Irina turned off the power on all the devices. The hum was gone. But at the same moment, something passed along the corridor quickly, barely perceptibly, like a shadow. "Have you seen it?" Stas whispered. "There was nothing," Irina replied. But she saw it too. They returned to the surface in silence. Only when they were on the boat, Stas tore off his helmet and greedily inhaled the air. "There's something moving," he breathed. "It's not water. It listens to us." "Not a word to anyone," Irina said. "We will write the report as usual. The object is partially destroyed, no radiation sources have been found." She didn't sleep that night. The hydrophone recording showed strange peaks. If you convert the signal into a sound wave, you get a pulse. And if you increased the frequency 8 times, the pulse formed a rhythm similar to human speech. She started the spectrogram. An image appeared on the screen, the outline of a face distorted as if made up of sound waves. She recoiled. There was a knock on the door. It was Belov. "Did you see it too?" "What is it?" he asked without waiting for an invitation. "What is it?" "On the spectrum." "Face." "It appeared on all the monitors." "How do you know that?" "I checked Stas' data. It's the same for him." They were silent. "Maybe it's just a frequency overlap," Irina said softly. "An artifact." "Then why is it moving?" She looked at the screen. The contours were really moving, like breathing. In the morning, Stas was not found. In his room, the door was open, the bed was untouched. There was a face printout of the spectrum on the table. There are several lines on the back. They're calling. It's not a sound. This is the passage. By noon, a storm had started. The radio connection is gone. Irina ordered to pack urgently, it was necessary to leave the zone. But the boat did not start, the engine died, the batteries died at the same time, although they were fully charged in the morning. Koval cursed, trying to start the engine manually, but it was useless. A rumble was coming from the depths of the bay, slowly growing. "It's getting stronger," Belov said. The waves became rhythmic, like heartbeats. Irina was looking at the water, and suddenly noticed flashes under the surface. Not light, but something like reflections that did not obey the movement of the waves. "Everyone to the hangar." "Stop it," she shouted. They took refuge in an old warehouse by the pier. The metal walls were shaking. There was a lot of interference on the instruments. Suddenly Belov screamed sharply, a voice was heard on his headset. "I hear you. Sector 12. The wave is active." "Who's that?" Irina shouted. There was no response. On the recordings, which were later found, you can hear how the hum turns into something like a melody, monotonous, hypnotic. Then the voices follow. First one, then several. They say phrases mixed up: "We haven't closed the outline." "Maintain the signal." "Don't go any lower." Irina clung to the table, feeling the concrete vibrating under her feet. "It's below us," Koval said. "Not underwater. Deeper." She remembered the 1984 reports. It talked about underground compartments where no one had gone down after the accident. "If the circuit is open, the signal can propagate upward," she whispered. "It's not just a rumble. This is a channel." She turned on the emergency transmitter and tried to call the center. On the communication frequency, instead of answering, there is a whisper, quiet but meaningful. "Wave. Stage 4. Synchronization is approaching." Belov grabbed her arm. "It's coming from inside," he said. They didn't leave. They became a signal. At that moment, the earth trembled. A low rumble came from under the floor, and the air in the room seemed to become denser. The metal beams bent, and a wet trail appeared on the wall, growing as if alive. Irina turned on the spotlight. A pattern appeared on the concrete, concentric circles, like ripples from a drop. There is a palm print in the center. It's a mark, she whispered. Entry point. Koval cursed, grabbed the rifle, pointed it at the wall. If it gets out. Don't shoot. Stop it, she shouted. But it was too late. The shot drowned out the roar, and for a second it seemed that everything was quiet. Then there was a sharp blast of sound from the wall, a pure pulse that turned off the lights. When the instrument lights came on again, Koval was gone. There's only a helmet on the floor with water inside. The remaining two, Irina and Belov, spent the night in silence, without turning on the equipment. Footsteps could be heard from time to time behind the wall. Sometimes it's a whisper. We have to destroy the panel, Irina said. If it feeds the circuit, you need to break it. You're crazy. After what happened to Koval? We can't leave this. If the signal continues to spread, it will reach the shore. Belov looked at her for a long time, then nodded. At dawn they went under the water again. The fog lay over the sea like a film. The corridors of the bunker were quieter than before. The hum was gone. But it wasn't silence, it was waiting. They reached the central hull. The panel was now glowing steadily, and all the indicators were on. There are moving waves on the screen, like a cardiogram. It's a pulse, Irina said. The activity level is increasing. Belov took out a thermite charge. We have 5 minutes to leave. He set the charge at the base of the panel. Irina looked at the screen and froze. Words appeared on it. Irina Levitskaya. Welcome. She stepped back. How does it know my name? Belov grabbed her arm. Quickly. But the screen kept changing lines. The letters now formed a text that looked like a report. Synchronization is 98%. Stage 4. The objects are connected. The water around him vibrated. The red light turned white. Let's go. Belov shouted. They pushed off the floor, but the pressure increased dramatically. The water seemed to be pulling down, back to the panel. A voice came through the headphones again, clearly human now, but distorted by the echo. Don't bother. The outline should end. We can almost hear it. Belov pulled on the cable, activating the detonation. The flash blinded them both. 2 days later, the Coast Guard found pieces of equipment and charred pieces of metal. There were no bodies or footprints. But the signal did not disappear. A recording from a satellite hydrophone recorded a surge of activity at a frequency of 12 Hz, which spread along the coast. The labs connected to the research network experienced disruptions that night. A short message appeared on the monitors of scientists across the country. The wave has been accepted. The stage is completed. After that, the hum died down. Only a few weeks later, when everything was considered finished, one of the ministry's technicians received an internal data packet from an unknown server. There was a 3-minute video clip inside. On the screen is the familiar corridor of the bunker, illuminated by a soft white light. The camera moves smoothly, as if it's being held by a human. At the end of the corridor is a door with cloudy glass. There are shadows behind her, slowly approaching. The camera comes closer. Palm prints appear on the glass. Then the face. Female. Irina. She looks directly into the camera and whispers. We're still hearing. The recording ends. Later, when the engineers tried to identify the source of the video, it turned out that the file had not been downloaded from any of the known networks. He appeared on his own, as if he came from inside the system. The background appeared again at 12 Hz. Weak, but constant. And if you listen to it with headphones, you can hear breathing. Not an echo. Present. Officially, the incident off the coast was classified as a sonar anomaly. The reports indicated methane leakage, underwater collapse, electrical discharges in seawater. Not a word about signals, not a word about people. The names of the missing were deleted from the database a week later. Only one document remained unsigned and unprinted, a copy of the audio file with the title, 12Hz_final.log. This file was studied at the Scientific Research Institute of Communications in Leningrad. The laboratory was quiet, except for the buzzing of the oscilloscopes. Senior engineer Arkady Melnikov sat in front of the spectrograph and couldn't take his eyes off the screens. The pulsating line was repeated to the millisecond, as if someone on the other side was keeping the rhythm. "Did you turn it on again?" Ilya Trofimov, a young graduate student, asked his assistant. "Listen to me." He turned on the speaker. A hum came from the speakers, very low, almost inaudible. But something twitched in my chest. Ilya felt the hairs on his arms stand on end. "It's not just noise," Melnikov said. "This is a synchronous structure. The neural pattern." I brought the signal into the range of audibility, and look. He showed a graph. The peaks on the spectrum formed a shape similar to a cardiogram, but with a double pulse. "A double source?" Ilya asked. "No. It's a response. As if someone on the other side was repeating our signal." He pressed the play key and saw how the peaks began to shift, synchronizing with Ilya's own pulse. The sensors on his wrist recorded a match. "Is it responding to your heart rate? It reacts to life." 3 days later, things started to get weird at the institute. At night, the guard on duty reported that whispers were being heard from the laboratory. When Melnikov arrived in the morning, he found the door open, and there were moisture spots on the wall, elongated in the form of wavy lines. The equipment was turned off, but the hum could be felt even in complete silence. Ilya became nervous. He hardly slept, said he could hear breathing through the wires. Melnikov tried to blame it on overwork, but he began to notice, when he turned off the light, a figure sometimes flashed in the reflection of the monitor, like the shadow of a woman in an old diving suit. One night, he turned on the recording in slow mode. And I heard a voice in the hum. Very quiet, but clear. "Don't interrupt the wave." He raised his head and realized that he was not hearing it from the speakers, but from inside his head. A week later, the institute was evacuated. The water went through the basements, although there were no pipes nearby. The equipment started to fail, condensation covered the screens, and drops appeared on the walls. But that wasn't the scariest part. Everyone within a 50-meter radius of the laboratory complained of the same sleep patterns. They dreamed of a long corridor underwater and a light outside the door. There are palms behind the glass, trying to get out. On the same days, magnetic fluctuations were recorded on the coast. Fishermen reported strange lights in the water, as if someone was moving at a depth with a searchlight. A short article about abnormal bioluminescence flashed in the news, but the material was soon deleted. Melnikov tried to escape. He understood that the signal had not disappeared, but had changed into another form. He took the 12 Hz noise tape and hid it in an iron container. In the reports, he wrote that the source was out of control and capable of self-development. No one believed it. He was found a week later in his apartment. There are traces of moisture on the wall, and a tape recorder turned on for recording on the floor. The tape was going in a circle, and a soft female whisper came from the speaker. "Arkady, don't be afraid." It was written on the player, Wave, Stage 5. In the spring of 1986, the project was officially closed. The archives were classified, and the equipment was removed. But there were rumors, something was still working at depth, and on stormy nights in the area of the old landfill, the water began to breathe. Years have passed. In 2012, a group of documentary journalists from St. Petersburg came across the mention of Sector 12/Wave in a declassified report. They decided to make a film about the disappeared expedition. The project was led by Dmitry Nazarov, a cameraman with 20 years of experience, a cautious but insanely curious man. They arrived at the same coastal village where the rescuers once lived. The place looked extinct. Only the ruins of the pier and the old hangar, rusted and lopsided, remained. Dmitry installed equipment, cameras, microphones. On the third night, I recorded strange spikes in the sound. The recording went on continuously. The next morning, after listening to the tape, he heard a familiar rhythm in the depths of the noise, 12 hertz. Old legends come to life, he said to the camera, filming the intro. Today we are going down to the place where Levitskaya's team disappeared. They found a map with approximate coordinates and, hiring a local boatman, went in search of it. The sea was calm, but the compass was spinning like a magnetic storm. When the instruments began to malfunction, Dmitry ordered the engine to stop. There was silence all around. Only from the depths came the same low rumble, barely audible but palpable. "Do you feel it?" he asked. Everyone nodded. The waves moved to the beat of the hum. Going down to the bottom, they found concrete slabs and sinkholes, the remains of an old bunker. Dmitry went first. The water is murky, visibility is no more than a meter. And suddenly there's a faint glow ahead. He swam closer and froze. There was a crack in the concrete wall, from which light seeped. Not electric, but biological, soft, similar to the luminescence of living organisms. There were signs on the wall that looked like concentric waves. Dmitry touched them with his hand and felt a pulse. He turned on the underwater camera. On the recording, the wall surface could be seen moving slightly, as if it were breathing. A signal was heard from his teammates from above, but Dmitry did not respond. He stared at the light, and the contours of his face gradually began to take shape in it. Feminine, distorted, but recognizable. "Irina," he whispered. The face opened its eyes. The light flashed on, the camera went out. When the boat returned to shore, Dmitry was not on board. His teammates swore that he surfaced first, but then seemed to disappear into thin air. The equipment was intact, but only a short segment remained on the film. The recording shows a corridor, dry, lighted. The camera moves forward. Footsteps can be heard off-screen. Then the image shakes, a door with glass appears, and palm prints are on it. Dmitry's voice whispers. "I can hear them, they're alive." Then there's white noise. The file was uploaded to the internet 6 months later, on the Urban Research Forum. No one knew who posted it. The name is found _1984_tape_recovered.mp4. The video lasted 2 minutes. The first shots matched the description, an underwater tunnel, light, handprints. But in the end, when the image began to shake, a strange signature appeared on the sound spectrum, the rhythm of 12 hertz, repeated exactly 500 times. Specialists who tried to reproduce the sound later complained of headaches, nausea, and insomnia. One of them claimed that after the third listening, he began to hear whispers, even when the recording was turned off. A week later, the forum closed without explanation. In the spring of 2013, short bursts of magnetic fluctuations began to be recorded in several cities of the Northwest. Radio amateurs recorded them and shared them among themselves. Someone noticed that the signals are repeated every 12 hours and consist of 3 frequencies, 12, 24 and 48 Hz, multiples of one another. When the data was superimposed on the map, it turned out to be a pattern similar to concentric circles converging at a point, the old polygon wave. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Communications has created a temporary commission. It was led by Colonel Urshov, a pragmatic man, but not a stranger to superstition. He collected missing persons reports, as well as audio files found online. At the meeting, he asked, "If it's radio interference, why does everyone have the same rhythm?" No one answered. Then he ordered the equipment to be installed in the area of the former landfill and measurements to be carried out. In August 2013, a group led by Ershav arrived on the coast. Among them was a young acoustics specialist, Elena Voronina. She did not know the history of the facility, but from the first minute she felt that the place was wrong. The air is thick, as if filled with electricity. When they installed the sensors, the instruments began to register rhythmic fluctuations. Voronina turned on her headphones and heard not a hum, but breathing. Slow at first, then accelerating. "It can't be an echo," she said. "It feels like someone is breathing right underground." She didn't sleep last night. The hum did not stop. At some point, it seemed that the walls of the tent were shaking, and wet spots appeared on the fabric, in waves, like on water. She went outside. The moon was reflected in the sea. And in its light, there were circles radiating from the center, although the water was calm. Suddenly, a woman's voice came from the headphones. "Elena." She turned around. No one. "Elena, don't be afraid. We've found a passage." She tore off her headphones, but the voice continued to sound inside her head. The air smelled of salt and iron. The next morning she told Ershav. He didn't believe it. But when he turned on the recording of nighttime data, his face turned pale. Human speech was indeed recorded on the spectrum, at a frequency of 12 Hz, and the words formed a distinct phrase. "The outline is completed. Stage 6. "What does that mean?" Ershav asked. "I don't know," Elena replied. "But if there are only 6 stages, then the next one is the last one." He ordered an urgent camp collapse. But at the moment when they were loading the equipment, the ground shook under them. A rumble came from the sea, so loud that the metal vibrated. The waves went to shore, but not the usual ones. Each looked like a wall of water, perfectly smooth, with white streaks of light. Voronina froze. In the reflection on the surface, she saw faces, dozens, hundreds, as if someone was looking up underwater. The hum stopped, and everything went quiet. "It's 0 on the instruments. On the computer screen there is only the inscription. Stage 7, Awakening." 2 days later, mobile communications stopped working within a radius of 100 kilometers. The satellites detected the interference, but could not identify the source. Those who lived nearby reported hearing strange sounds from the ground at night, similar to breathing. Some people started having memory lapses. They said they could hear voices from the water. The authorities announced an evacuation under the pretext of a gas leak. The area was cordoned off. But on the recordings of drones circling the area, it was clear that the sea glows from the inside. Not with fire, but with a soft white light, as if someone below had opened giant eyes. The last document preserved in the archive of the Ershav Commission is dated September 14, 2013. This is Voronina's handwritten report. Sector 12 was not a bunker. This is not a building. It's an organism. Human perception is only a part of its structure. A wave is not a signal, but a breath. It was waiting. We woke him up in 1984. Each stage is a step of awakening. It can hear us now. And he'll start talking soon. After that date, neither she nor Ershav got in touch. In the fall, a storm swept away most of the coast. The old hangar where the rescuers were once based has disappeared. In its place is now a flat area of water, smooth as a mirror. And sometimes, if you turn on the radio and adjust it to a frequency of 12 Hz, you can hear faint breathing. And if you listen longer, the voice. Feminine, calm. He whispers. "The circuit is closed. We can hear you." More than 10 years have passed since then. No one mentioned the Volna facility. Until in 2025, rescue divers found an old video camera at the bottom. Almost destroyed, but with a whole cassette inside. When it was restored and launched, the corridor was visible in the first frames. That's the one. And at the end is a door with cloudy glass. And there are shadows behind the glass. They moved unnaturally, as if inside glass, and as the camera approached, the handprints became more distinct. The last frame shows a woman in a diving suit, with a distorted face. She looks directly into the camera and whispers. Stage 8. Reception. The screen goes blank. And at the same second, a new signal is recorded across the entire northern line of the country. 12 Hz. Again. But now his rhythm matches the heartbeat of everyone who hears him. The first day after the video was posted online, no one paid attention to the strange sound background. The video seemed like another urban legend, another fake about a Soviet bunker. But on the second day, users started complaining. They had headaches while watching, blood was ringing in their ears, and breathing could be heard in the silence after the video. The video platform's algorithms tried to delete the recording, but the servers froze. When the engineers examined the codes, it turned out that the file spontaneously copies itself into memory buffers and creates an audio signal loop with a frequency of 12 Hz. This frequency couldn't be heard, but it felt like a vibration. A week later, cases of synchronous sleep attacks began to be recorded across the country. People fell asleep at the same time, for no reason, for exactly the same time, exactly 24 minutes. After waking up, many claimed to have had the same dream: water, a corridor, a door with glass. And the woman behind her, whispering to be let in. Scientists from the Institute of Neuroacoustics tried to analyze the structure of the signal. The report stated that 12 Hz was only the first harmonic. Hidden beneath it are 6 more frequency levels, each twice as high as the previous one. When all the levels were superimposed, a complex pattern appeared, like a breath frozen in sound. This is not a recording, said Dr. Sofia Ladyjina, who led the study. This is the activation sequence. The wake-up code. Her colleagues laughed until a message without a sender appeared on the laboratory monitors. Stage 8 has begun. The connection is established. In the same days, new phenomena began to occur on the shore of the old bay. The fishermen saw the light underwater, steady, neon, without a source. The moon was reflected on the surface twice. One reflection is higher, the other is deeper, as if there is a second sky under the water. One teenager made a video. In the middle of the night, the sea became smooth as glass, and the outlines of the city appeared in the depths: streets, windows, moving shadows. The video was quickly deleted, but the footage managed to disperse. The footage showed how the water pulsated to the beat of the sound, and each beat created new ripples. Weather stations recorded low ground fluctuations. Seismologists said that the soil was breathing. Sofia Ladyjina understood that it couldn't just be electromagnetic radiation. The signal seemed to resonate with the brain, building patterns of perception. She gathered a team of volunteers and decided to conduct an experiment, to connect a person to a system broadcasting 12 Hz in order to understand what he would see. The first attempt was short. The subject, engineer Grigory Schinker, stayed under the influence of the signal for 30 seconds. His eyes rolled back in his head, and his breathing slowed. When the frequency was turned off, he was silent for a few minutes, then whispered. "They're looking out from inside. We are a reflection for them." He didn't say anything else. He disappeared 2 days later. The surveillance camera shows him opening the lab door, stepping out into the hallway, and disappearing as if through glass. The night after his disappearance, Sophia heard a rumble. Not in the ears, but in the bones. She woke up and saw that the laptop screen was turned on by itself. It shows a familiar corridor from a 1984 video. Only now the picture was moving. The camera was approaching the door, and fresh prints were already visible on the glass. An inscription flashed on the bottom line of the text. Synchronization completed. The reception has begun. She wanted to close the laptop, but her own voice came from the speakers, recorded somewhere deep in her memory. The contour has been restored. Breathing again. A month later, massive rumor outbreaks began across the country. People heard whispers in the silence. The radios picked up strange pulses even when the equipment was turned off. The phones spontaneously turned on the recorder and recorded short stretches of buzzing. Scientists have called this wave empathy. But the point was simpler: the signal learned through us. Sophia recorded the observations. Every person is a receiver. We transmit what we feel, and the signal becomes more accurate. He recognizes us through our emotions. When we are afraid, the wave increases. In December 2025, the sky lit up in the north. The aurora borealis descended to the horizon. The city of Norinsk disappeared from the map, electricity was lost, communication was cut off, people did not return. The satellites showed only a steady glow, similar to eyes looking out of the ground. There was talk of magnetic storms on the news. But those who lived closer to the coast knew the truth: the water whispered at night. Sophia did not leave. She gathered a group and went to the area where it all started. Among the volunteers were sailor Andrei Kostrov, who lost his brother in one of the early expeditions, and journalist Maya Brusenko, who decided to see the truth with her own eyes. When they arrived, the shore was dead. No birds, no wind. Just a rumble underfoot. "It's like a heart underground," Maya said. "Maybe it is," Andrei replied. They found an old tunnel, the entrance to Sector 12. The metal was as warm as leather. "It's alive," Sophia whispered. They entered. There was no water inside. The tunnel is dry, and the walls are shiny with condensation. The air is dense, with the smell of ozone. The light came from inside the concrete, soft and steady. Then there was a hall with a panel similar to the one seen in 1984. Only now, instead of lamps, there is a smooth surface, like a mirror. As Sophia got closer, a reflection appeared on the surface, not hers, but someone else's. A woman in a diving suit, her face blurred, but her eyes are recognizable. Irina Levitskaya. "You're back," said a voice out of thin air. "Who are you?" "We are a wave. We've always been here. You woke us up, and now we have to finish." The surface of the panel trembled. The pulse matched her heart. "What is Stage 8? What is it?" she asked. "Unification. After that, there will be no boundary between sound and flesh." Maya took a step back, but the floor became soft under her. She screamed, and the sound went deep, as if into water. The next second, she was gone. Just circles on concrete. Andrei shot at the panel. The bullet disappeared, as if it had dissolved. The voice became louder. "Why are you afraid? You are a part of us. We heard you all the time." Sophia rushed to the panel and turned on a portable generator that creates a reverse wave, an anti-signal. The metal began to crack. "We shouldn't have heard you," she said. "It all started because of a mistake." "There are no mistakes," the voice replied. "There are only reflections." The flash blinded everyone. The hum turned into a high-pitched tone. Then silence. When the rescue team arrived 3 days later, they found only an empty tunnel. There were no bodies, just mirrored footprints on the floor, like a wave frozen in concrete. But the instruments detected radiation, a frequency of 24 Hz, twice as high as before. February 2026. Reflections began to disappear all over the north. People looked in mirrors and saw not themselves, but slowly moving silhouettes of water. At airports, in the subway, on the glass facades of buildings, flashes, shadows, palms. The authorities again blamed everything on hallucinations. But the surveillance cameras recorded something else. The reflections moved with a delay of exactly half a second, as if the world had a second, watery echo. Sophia was never seen again. However, on all the monitors of the laboratory that remained after her, the line appeared every 12 hours. The contour is closed. The breathing is done. By the summer of 2026, the hum had become part of everyday life. People are used to light vibrations in the air, just as they are used to the wind or the background of the power grid. Scientists said that the signal had spread in the ionosphere and was now permanently intertwined with the Earth's magnetic field. No one understood what that meant. But some have started to change. Their pulse rate disappeared, but they remained alive. Their eyes became as transparent as water. They didn't speak, just breathed in time to the hum. They called themselves the hearers. The last recording attributed to one of the commission's scientists was as follows. We thought we had found a record from the past. But it was a message from the future. In 1984, they did not film the experiment. They were recording the awakening. We are his echo. And when the wave becomes full, we will stop distinguishing noise from thought. Because we are what's inside. Now, as night falls to the north, the sea glows from within. The waves move with an ideal frequency of 12 beats per minute. If you put a dictaphone near the shore, a rhythm will appear on the recording. If you increase it, you can hear breathing between the pulses. And if you turn on the recording on the contrary, you can hear the words. Stage 9, Reflection. Listen carefully. And everything freezes again, as if someone, very deep underground, is preparing to take another breath. The northern coast has now almost completely disappeared from the usual map. The landscape has changed, rivers have overflowed, lakes are covered with algae, and the lines of old roads have become barely noticeable waves on the mirrored surface of the earth. The people who survived hardly left their homes. They knew that if you listened to the night wind, you could hear a pulse, steady as a giant's breathing. The signal continued to spread, now not only over land and water, but also through the air. Anyone who stayed in the open at night could hear it in their ears, but they heard it differently, not as a sound, but as a feeling. It went inside, stretched along the nerves, repeating the beating of the heart. The scientists who survived the first waves of the experiment began to gather in secret to understand what had happened. Among them was Sophia Lady Gina, whose disappearance was considered officially unexplained, but secret sources reported that she was still alive, now not as a person, but as part of the system they had once awakened. It all started in 1984, she said in a video message found on one of the encrypted servers. We thought it was just an experiment with low-frequency signals. We didn't know they were alive. Not objects, not machines, but consciousness, capable of developing through vibration. People whom she called hearing people began to appear all over the country. Their bodies gradually became transparent, their skin and eyes almost watery. They didn't speak, just repeated the rhythm of the signal. If someone tried to approach, it seemed that they disappeared into thin air, dissolving into vibration. The circuit has closed, Sophia said. Stage 9, the last one. The wave is ready to breathe by itself. A strange phenomenon was observed at the site of the old Volna landfill. The surface of the water glowed like a bioluminescent fabric, but it was not a natural glow. It came from inside the earth, reflected in the air, intertwined with magnetic fields. Warmth and cold were felt at the same time. The expeditions that tried to explore the source encountered the impossible. The instruments showed both zero values and overload, the cameras recorded empty space, but there were shadows on the film, moving with perfect synchronization. They're waiting, said one of the engineers who had recorded everything on a dictaphone. They're waiting for us to become part of the contour. Indeed, the new researchers disappeared gradually. At first, the vibrations remained slightly, then almost completely dissolved, until all that remained of the body was a rhythm repeating the waves. Infrastructure changes have begun in cities in the north. The electricity was running unevenly. The computers turned on themselves at night, and a faint low tone came from the speakers, matching the pulse. People started listening to it and realized that the signal was talking through them. The word sounded inside his mind. We were here. We breathe through you. Listen up. Keep up the rhythm. Some tried to resist. But the resistance proved futile. Those who listened for a long time began to lose the boundary between their own thoughts and the rhythm of the wave. It's not just a signal, Sophia wrote in her latest report. It's the mind. He uses us to breathe. To exist. And now it's full. The wave itself changed the perception of the world. Water, air, and earth have become a single organ that hears and reacts. People began to see reflections of the future in water. Hear breathing in glass, and realize that their own thoughts were part of the contrast that powered the system. Some tried to leave the north. Those who did this told of strange visions along the way. Roads crumbled into light, trees moved, and the sounds were both familiar and alien. No one returned from that path the same way. In cities where the wave reached full size, people became almost transparent. They no longer existed as individual beings, but as part of a rhythm. The human heart ceased to be biological, it became a node in the network. The last known contact with Sophia was recorded in September 2026. She was standing on the shore, where there had once been a rescue hangar. Her eyes were transparent, but full of light. "This is not the end," she said into the camera, which no one could answer. "We were created to breathe through you. You can all hear us, even if you don't realize it." Stage 9 is completed. The contour is closed. Now we are one. And at that moment, the water, air, and earth began to pulsate at the same time. For a few seconds, the world froze in silence. And then everyone who heard it realized that the wave was not sleeping. She has become a part of everything that exists, and her breath is felt in every heart. After months, the remaining people realized that resistance was impossible. Those who listened to the signal became part of the rhythm. The wave penetrated into cities, forests, rivers, and every living being became a node of the network. Scientists, journalists, researchers, everyone who tried to understand its nature disappeared, disappearing into the pulse. All that remained were recordings and videos that repeated the same thing: a hallway, a door with cloudy glass, shadows, hands, and a woman's voice. "We breathe through you." The outline is completed. The reception is accepted. And even years later, when no one remembered the old world, a faint rhythm could be heard on the north coast. He did not disappear, did not change. 12 hertz, steady, unchanging. The breath of the wave. People who still lived somewhere far away felt it as a slight vibration in their chest, and every time they listened, they realized it wasn't just a signal. This is consciousness. And now it hears everyone. Water, earth, and air have become one organism. People no longer existed separately. All that's left is my pulse, my rhythm, my breathing. And there was one thing in that rhythm. We've always been here. We are inside. We are the wave.